Good evening. On behalf of the Parrott and Knight families and this church, Azure Hills Church, I want to welcome you to this remembrance and celebration of an extraordinary person. It's hard to talk about this church without talking about Ruth, because it seems like Ruth was always here. And so losing her is especially difficult for all of us, isn't it? I was thinking about Ruth and praying about this day, and the Lord reminded me of Proverbs 31 woman. And I just want to read a little bit from here and see if you don't recognize your dear one, Ruth, in this. A woman of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers, we could say the quilting needle. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. And I can say this next one with surety. Her children arise and call her blessed. And many women do noble things, but you surpass them all, they say. Honor her for all her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. This is a time to celebrate, but it's also a time to mourn, for we have truly lost someone extraordinary. Tears are welcome here, as well as laughter and all the feelings in between. So I hope that you feel that this is a safe place. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Loving Father, who is also named the God of all comfort, your presence is here. You are with us, and you know our hearts. And while we are assured that our precious Ruth is resting well in you, and that her future is secure in Jesus Christ, we mourn her deeply. We miss her. So I ask you to send your Spirit here to wrap around her family, everyone, and all together, and everyone who has attended here, all her friends and loved ones. May we know that we have been with you and you walk with us in this journey of grief from today onward. In the name of Jesus, the resurrection and the life, amen.
All right. She wouldn't be okay with me crying up here. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot to our family. This is either going to be the shortest life sketch or the longest. I'm not sure which one. On June 4, 1926, Ruth Louise was born to Dr. Roscoe and Mildred Hippick. She was born in her dad's office, which happened to be on the first floor of the apartment for their home. Ruth was the middle child. Her older sister, Dorothy, 1 year to her senior, and her younger brother, Wilburn, Bill, was 3 years behind them. Ruth was always someone that had an incredible amount of determination. I think she got that from her dad. A little bit of stubbornness, but a lot of heart. Growing up, she had a good childhood. They lived in Los Angeles. Her dad was a physician and had a practice in LA. Just to give me an example of how her dad could be, one day they were driving to school, and they were just running a little bit late. And the school bus just happened to leave right before they got there. So he pulled up next to the school bus and honked and honked. And the school bus driver was not going to stop. So, a little yellow paint on the fender of the car, he persuaded the school bus driver to stop. When my mom and her sister got on the school bus, they were welcomed with a round cheer. She graduated from Linwood Academy in 3 years in 1943. In college, she decided that she was going to take nursing. And again, there's a theme for Ruth, and that is determination. Also, she was never to be outdone by a good bet or a good, what's the right term, challenge. And she liked to have fun as well. Now, I didn't know this when I was growing up because I think she was afraid I was going to have fun. So she was a little more stern than this, but she decided one time that her roommate and her decided that they were going to have some fun one evening in the women's dorm. So they waited until all the kids, all the students, and the girls went to sleep. They dressed up like men. They had hats, suits, ties, the whole bit. And they went from room to room, surprising the sleeping girls. And they did a really good job until her roommate missed putting their hand over the mouth. Screams and the dean coming upstairs, they knew they were caught. So they ran down the end of the hall, and wouldn't you know what, the last room they ran into didn't have a closet. They had an armoire. So the two of them climbed into their armoire, thinking that they were going to get away, but the problem was they were laughing so loud that they were found out. One thing was sure is that you never told Mom she couldn't do something. Boy, she'd prove you wrong. She was not afraid of anything. She graduated from nursing, and she had the summer off, and so she decided at 18 years old, or maybe it was 20, but she decided that she was going to drive back to Washington, D.C. So she bought a 1930 or 31 Chevy. Her dad, not being extremely thrilled with the idea of this, rebuilt the engine so that it would be good. And so she set off on her own from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. No freeways. And she made it. She made it there. Well, the job that was waiting for her actually ended up not happening, but that didn't matter to her. She ended up working and doing some stuff for the summer. And when it was time for her to come back, her mom was not going to have it. So her mom jumped on the train and went back to be with her. And the two of them ended up driving back home that end of the summer. Well, there was one example. There was one thing that I remember very much is that my grandmother was not used to driving in a Chevy. She had Packards, and so this was way below kind of what her standards were. So when they would pull into the hotel, she would end up telling her, park way away from the entrance because I don't want anybody seeing me getting out of this car. Well, one time that they pulled in, there was the bell person there at the gate. He saw them coming in, and when they started getting out, he went over and he says, I've seen it all. I have seen it all. Two women in an old car with a yellow canary going across the country by themselves. I have seen it all. And that's just how they went. They had a great time on the way back. They had some engine trouble, but they made it back. After she got back, she went and got her BSN degree up in Walla Walla in 1951, graduating there. And that same year, she married my dad, Kenneth Charles Parrott. They settled in Los Angeles, and she worked at the White Memorial for several years there until my oldest sister, Raylene, was born in 1952. Yeah, I thought I was good numbers. 1952. Well, it was only 2 days short. Yeah, so it was right at the end of the year because it was good for taxes. And so she was born, and then the next year, 1953, Carolyn was born, and they had a great family, and they were doing well. They had no plans to have any more, but guess what? Sure enough, she was pregnant, and I'm kind of glad she had me. But they messed up because they didn't have me in December. It was January, so that was the end of the tax break. In 1963, they decided to move out of Los Angeles, and they ended up staying in Riverside for a year until they found a property here in Grand Terrace. And in 1965, they built their home on Grand Terrace Road in Grand Terrace, and this is where she actually lived the rest of her life. They began attending this new church who had just opened up. There used to be a country club. The country club had a dance floor, it had a bar, it had basketball and tennis courts. It even had a jet plane in the back. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I do because I remember playing on it. And they became strong members of the church, my dad and my mom, and they were always involved in things in the church. I don't think that ever changed. And I know that up until her last day, she continued to be involved. In fact, I know this is after I was supposed to do up to when she retires, but she loved this church and loved to be able to volunteer for it. So it meant a lot to her to be able to be active and be able to help. She ended up going to Rubidoux school system where she was the school nurse. And, it might intimidate some people because Rubidoux High was not the particularly best location. You had about 3,000 students there, lots of fights. even in the administration, but she was never intimidated by that. If there was a fight and the kid was on the ground, she would just push her way on through and say, "Get out of my way, I'm going to take care of this person," and they did. As a mother, she showed us, I think she loved us, but she felt that she needed to give us, to be very strong, to give us direction so that we would grow up to be good people. I know that there was, she never slowed down. And for those of you that know her, I don't know if any of you could say that she ever sat down and did nothing. In fact, when we were in school, she did wedding cakes. And I don't know how many people here have either had a wedding cake or maybe their kids have had a wedding cake. I mean, look at all the hands. Okay. So she did wedding cakes to help pay for school and help us be able to save for college. I remember, I kind of lost the taste for frosting after raiding the fridge several times. But it was interesting because, I got my night owl from her, because she never went to bed before midnight. Oftentimes it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So, and she was up early in the morning to go to school. I remember when she did sit down, she literally would fall asleep within about 30 seconds. So she kept moving. One thing that was really important to her was her faith in God. And I don't think she was ever too old to continue to learn. In fact, I know she was in Bible study. She was studying her Bible, studying things about it, learning things again until her last day. And so that's one thing that she instilled in us. Was the love of Christ. Another thing that she did is she didn't complain. She was tough, but a heart of gold. She was in a lot of pain, but she wouldn't complain. In fact, she kind of didn't want you to see kind of the heart that was there. She kept this really strong kind of persona around her. But through her acts, through her things that she did, she continued to make a presence for everybody that was in her life. There were no casual people that were in her life. You were friends. You were family. I'm doing pretty good. So, after she after she retired, she actually started a new career. And I know my sisters are going to talk a little bit about that part of her process. But before I do stop, I just wanted to say one thing about her. In fact, I hope Raylene isn't going to say this, but there's a saying that I think is really great, and it was, I think she said, it's not about whether I can, it's not about who's going to let me, it's who's going to stop me. And that was her. I mean, it didn't matter. I know our kids came down, they went to Disneyland. I mean, she was there at the very beginning, and she refused to leave until the end when the fireworks were happening. That was just a little bit of her. She ran hot. What? 14 hours. At probably, 92 or 93 at that time. So anyway, she was an incredible person, incredible mom. And we will miss her until we see her again. Thank you.
Well, when Mom retired, she said she didn't know when she'd ever had time to work because she was busier than she ever was when she was working. She was always a crafty person and always never one to just sit around and do nothing. One summer, she signed up for a class at the Redlands YMCA with a teacher named Jo Sonia Jansen. It was $5, and she thought that was an awful lot for the class, but she went, and then she found out that was $5 was the whole week. So she kept going, and so that was the beginning of the toll painting. Now, she'd always thought that her brother and sister were so talented because they could draw, and that she couldn't draw, so obviously she wasn't artistic or talented. But with toll painting, they traced the pattern on. Of course, you had to do all the shading and all the strokes and everything else, and she did those well. So we had toll painting on everything. She did the little sleigh there, which we have pictures of the grandkids.
For the 12 days of Christmas.
We have some plates for the 12 days of Christmas that are in the house. Pretty soon she was painting on everything. They would get cabinet doors and paint. Usually animals, ducks, or sheep or cute little kids. She made some little triptychs. She painted shirts. She painted sweatshirts. She painted everything. We signed up for a club, and we would go every month and paint things over in San Bernardino. We also went to New Orleans for a seminar for more painting. But this was a source of a lot of painted shirts and gifts, things that she could give away. It wasn't really a big moneymaker type of thing. Okay.
So again, when Raylene and I were babies, she took her first cake decorating. She took her first cake decorating class, and she was so proud of herself. And so this one Halloween, she decorated this cake in the Halloween figures with little licorice figurines on it. And she wanted to show my grandpa, my dad's mother and dad, and because she was so proud, because he was a baker. So the next morning, she found that someone had neatly scooped all of the figurines off. And she said that she did a search of mouths and found out that she had a black mouth. But she went on to make hundreds of cakes for weddings, for birthdays. And then we got pulled into it with her, and we were doing catering, lots of catering for the weddings.
She would bring Tylenol
And
and
slippers.
slippers because she
We would
knew
all-
by the end of the evening we'd need them.
And I mean, I think that she also went on to teach in Pathfinders, the cake decorating, and in school classes, so she was always busy. There was never a time when she was not doing something with her crafts.
When she had a cake to do on the weekend, it would be big cakes, 200 people or 300 people. And she would literally every night when she got home from work, she would bake cakes. And she would get them, and she'd get them in the freezer, get them crumb-coated so that they'd tender up. And then by Thursday night, then she'd be making roses. And by Thursday night, she'd be putting it all together. And we'd generally deliver, she'd say, Sundays, please. So Saturday night would be the final touches, but we would deliver on Sunday mornings.
And we had a dog. And one day, the dog decided to check out what's on the table in the dining room. And what it didn't step on, it nibbled on. And she had to hustle to try to get that cake situated for the bride and the groom.
She
And make a new
she had to
cake.
remake a lot of that cake.
It was a long night. Long night.
Mom went to a trunk show on smocking, and pretty soon we were smocking dresses. I think she was thinking in terms of sooner or later she was going to be a grandma. And that was kind of the goal there. But she went to the trunk show. So we started smocking things. We smocked bonnets. We smocked little shirts. We smocked dresses. And they were all given to other people for their babies.
Christening.
And christenings, yes, we had christenings. We even smocked the outfits for my flower girl and my Bible boy, but she had to wait to become a grandma. Now, let's see, I think you're going to do that.
All right, so sewing. Let's talk about sewing. Sewing was one of her favorite pastimes. And when we were in grade school, it wasn't even at that point necessarily common. She made our school clothes, including the underwear. And then, you know, we basically, our thing was to pick out what colors, what material that we wanted, and we got them sewn up for us.
Maybe
And then-
coordinated outfits.
Coordinated outfits. And then Raylene has a pretty good sewing room, and I have a sewing room, so we've done little bits, but nothing as, I would say, as comparison to her. She was a perfectionist. So when you saw it, it was perfectionist.
Kind of step back a little bit to crocheting and knitting. Her hands were never, ever idle. If she was sitting someplace, she had a crochet hook or knitting needles in her hand. There was no idle hands. When I had outpatient surgery, she sat in the post-op room waiting with the nurses and making little mesh scrubbers for the kitchen and giving them to all the nurses. I still have scrubbers, and I use them every day. She gave a lot of those away. She made sweaters, she made tops, hats, scarves, afghans.
And card holders for everybody.
No, not yet. When we traveled to Norway in 1984, and we took a cruise on a mailboat. So we it was kind of like the city bus that would take, or not city bus, but like a county bus that would take you from town to town in Norway, since they have so many fjords. So everybody would sit in the waiting area there while we would go from one port to the next. And she always had her knitting needles there. So she was working on teaching me how to knit, and I had a nice color-blocked top that I was making, and we bought some yarn in Norway, and I still need to finish the back of it. Okay, there you go.
Okay. So then it gets on to her embroidery. So now she decided, she went to the Redland Sewing Center, and they had some really fancy Berninas, and Berninas was her most favorite sewing machine that there was. So pretty soon she started taking classes there, and she started making embroidery, and this is when the quilts started happening, and she embroidered shirts and pants, and
She sewed the logos for my pharmacy on all of our smocks and jackets.
but she especially liked to make the baby quilts, and for friends and stuff. And then she was making pins and wall hangings for the Ladies Lifts program. And one of the logos that they had was she had frogs, and it meant fully rely on God. So she made little. Was it like little?
She made some frogs, and she
But
made
she made,
some
like-
frog pins for everybody to wear.
Yeah. And then the bears, be ever always ready. And then hearts. And then the latest thing that she would do is for the baptismals, she got
Well,
the
handkerchiefs.
handkerchiefs. and she would embroider the person's name on it and give it to them. But I'm going to go back to the sewing, what David was talking about. So the thing was interesting for Christmas and all these different things. Because she was so busy, how many times would she come to us at Christmas time with a bag, not a decorative bag, just a grocery bag with something in it and say, this is your Christmas present, this is your birthday present, and I'll finish it in a bit.
Well, and if she didn't happen to have a bag, she would say, put your hands out and close your eyes.
Okay.
When Mom retired, she worked, during the school year only, and she was off during the summers. However, there were always things that she could have done in the fall. So her first big vacation was a repositioning cruise that went from Canada down the eastern coast through the Caribbean and the Panama Canal and came back up to Los Angeles. It was about 4 weeks, and she decided that she really liked cruising. So after that, we would save up. Mom and I would save up. My dad was not a big traveler, so I was her travel companion. We would save up, and we would go on a cruise. We went to the Caribbean on the SS Norway twice. We went to Alaska with Carolyn, and we went to Norway on the mail boat. We'd also gone to Scandinavia and Russia on another cruise where we took a toll painting class. She loved seeing new places. She loved learning new things, meeting new people. She found cruising such a good way to do that because she didn't have to keep moving. She could just stay in her little room, and she'd come out and she'd be in a new place. But she loved doing that.
So that was the interesting thing with her and Hal when they got married. It was kind of mandatory that he would like to go cruising with her. So it took a little bit for him to be convinced, but she got him into it. And then after that, when Hal passed away, then she started taking us kids. So she'd say, I think David went to Mediterranean, and she took me to a repositioning cruise, and we went to Azure Islands and Bermuda, things that we would never have had an opportunity of doing. But the most important thing was the special time that we spent with her.
Always being one for the crafts, she found the Campbell Folk School in North Carolina. It was a great place. It's like summer camp for adults. They have your dorms, they have homemade, the best food. And they had all these classes that you could take. She went and she made kaleidoscopes, but she just didn't make a few kaleidoscopes. She made like 30 kaleidoscopes in a week, in 5 days.
And baskets.
She made a hammered copper fountain. She did Fimo clay pins. She and Hal went there several times. And in 2014, I went with her, and we made Nantucket baskets. And again, we probably made 6 or 7, which was quite a few for how much time they take. She really wanted to go back again, and COVID sort of quashed that. It made it harder for her to travel. I'm really going to miss Mom's guiding hands and her encouragement as I try new crafts. It's the time spent with Mom was always just precious, and I'll have to say that I was most blessed, to have my mom around for as long as I did, and to have her love and unconditional, caring.
So let's talk about breakfasts. So my mom, when she retired, she had a certain restaurant that she would go on a specific day. And every single restaurant that she would go to, she had usually one specific hostess that she wanted to serve her. And she was extremely generous with that person. And when Hal and her would go, they went to Mimi's, and Hal would always insist on cloth napkins
For breakfast.
for breakfast, and fresh coffee if it was not newer than 10 minutes. Then she would go to Carolyn's Cafe, and again, that was on Sundays usually, or Fridays. And Denny's with Carol as her hostess, and that would be on Thursdays. And her special drink that they all knew what she wanted. They didn't even have to ask. When she came, they knew exactly what she was going to get. And with Carol, she had a special drink that she would always get brought to her, half coffee, half hot chocolate with whipped cream on top. Do we want to talk? Okay.
I think a lot of her hobbies, a lot of it was what she wanted to give away. On the fancy sewing machine, she was able to make these little coin purses, or little purses like this. And I'm guessing a few people around here have one of these. They're really nice. Not only that, she bought special fabric to go inside that's RFI, or so that you won't have anybody steal the information on your cards.
Copy.
She thought of everything.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm the youngest daughter, as she'd always introduce me as. She's my youngest daughter. How I feel about Ruth as my stepmom. When my dad married Ruth 23 years ago, that was such a happy day. We gained a bigger family with a brother, which we never had, and two wonderful sisters and their spouses and all their extra nieces and nephews. My dad would always call her the light of my life. In the 20 years of living here in California, I have gotten closer to Ruth and my dad, and cherish every moment. I remember the day, the Christmas, that my dad and Ruth organized all 6 of us, plus the kids, who are all grown up now, to get together at Christmas time in Lake Arrowhead. Ruth had painted names on all of our Christmas mugs, and then she had a pegboard to hang it, where all of our names are on it, and hang all of our mugs on it. Let's see. Over the 20 years, we have had numerous family gatherings, Mexican train games, embroidered our names on all our Christmas stockings, made little coin purses like we talked about already, jumper dresses for the girls and for the boys. But the many other things she made and did for us, I still cherish those. I'd go over on Sundays to do laundry, and I would visit with her and help her with whatever she needed done, or sometimes we'd just sit on the couch and visit. And then she would, quite often, she'd say, hey, you want a wabba bowl? So we'd go down to Wabba Grill and we'd get down the hill. I would call her a couple of times a week to see how she was doing, and she was, and I would say, now stay out of trouble, and she always replied, never, that's my middle name. She knew I liked to mow the back field beyond the house when it was time for mowing. So I get on the John Deere tractor and would do it on a Sunday when it wasn't raining. My dad taught me how to do that. Here are some wonderful words that describe Ruth that means a lot to me. The letter R stands for how I remember the time when she met George, Pete, my fiance, from Idaho. And when he went over to see her, one of the times she showed him her embroidery machine. He was fascinated with it. And she gave him this dog right here. She embroidered this for him, that she made for him. So he's always cherished it. She would always ask me how he was doing when she didn't see him. She supported Pete and I in our decision when we told her we were going to get married. And we wanted to have the wedding in her backyard. Then the pandemic hit. That was it. The letter U stands for understanding. She's a very understanding person that she is, and how supportive she has been to me and always helping me with ideas and suggestions on life. She was always encouraged me to take my teacher's test and offered to pay for it so that I would get a decent teaching job, she always called it. The letter T is how thoughtful she had been to everyone and to me and to my two sisters when we became part of the Knight parent household. I am so thankful that she and my dad got married. Sorry. And it made our family much bigger. H is for the humor that she and my dad had together. I remember one of the times at breakfast time, let's see, my dad held out his cupped hands, says, "Can I have a glass of milk? Can I have some milk?" And she brought over the milk and she poured it right in his hands. He was shocked. He's like, "I'm not doing that again." But just things like that, he had humor. When I was on my little excursion for a couple months to Oregon, just recently, I would call her every week to see how she was doing. When I told her I was coming back home, she said, "Good, and you're not leaving again, are you?" And I said, "No, I will not." She really was looking forward to me coming back home, and I was so happy to be home with her again. I'll miss her very much, but we will see her again in heaven very soon.
Wow. Ruth was my bonus mom, a bonus grandma for our children. She married my dad, so she was my mom. She opened her heart and their home to Candy, Heidi, and I, and our families. She was always generous with her love and affection and support, and all those gifts she made for her children, she made for all of us. Instantly, she had 9 more people to think about, birthdays and gift giving, and we were included. Those wonderful gifts and things that Raylene and Carolyn spoke of, we have those every day in our lives. I carry that purse with me every day. The zippered container is what I keep my earbuds in. She's in our lives every day with that. Mom would want me to be brief today. To hone my remarks, I thought of attributes and qualities that she exemplified. Take a moment. If you could think of one word that describes Ruth, what would it be? I did not compare notes with anyone today, including my brother, and the word I thought of was determined. That word, there's so many common themes in our writing, and many of us did not compare. So I was thinking about this word, and to summarize, when she thought of something she wanted, she figured out a way to get it. And that saying about who's going to stop me, boy, was that true. A good example of this is a time when I asked her, "So, hey, Mom, where's your next trip going to be?" And we all know that she loved traveling. And as we heard, she extended her generosity to her family after Dad died. And she replied very promptly, "I'm going to Iceland, and you and Chris are going to show me around." We were the way she was going to get there. She and Dad had stopped there briefly, but she was determined to really see Iceland, and that she did. She did that from the passenger seat of the Outback station wagon. Can you imagine? Chris on the front seat driving, Mom in the passenger seat, behind Carolyn, Raylene, and I. She would roll the window up and down. She'd say, "Stop there, I want to take a picture of this." Roll the window down, hold her iPad up, take a picture. She was always interested in things and learning new things. She got to stand on the top of Snæfellsjökull Glacier. She got to swim in the Blue Lagoon, and you saw those pictures of her with all that wonderful poultice on her face. She got to travel the Golden Circle. She got to travel on a ferry to the Vestman Islands and see puffins. She loved animals. She got to feel the spray of the waterfall on her face. She got to stay at summer houses. She got to go to church in Reykjavik. She got to meet Icelandic family. Her determination paid off. Then there was the summer of 2019, the summer of the weddings. Greta and Eric were married, and Chelsea and Miles. She had her ever-ready travel companion, Raylene, lined up to help her fly from coast to coast. Well, just weeks before the planned trips, she broke her hip. These weddings were to take place in Oregon and one in Virginia on consecutive weekends. Well, she and Raylene said, we're going through with this. While having had her full joyous week in Oregon at Chelsea and Miles's wedding, she might have bowed out of some of those events that we planned on the East Coast, but she was determined to be part of everything. She toured the White House, the Capitol. She attended a concert by the United States Air Force Band at the Capitol. She visited the Smithsonian. She attended dinners and rehearsals, and she supervised the making of 44 pies. And she walked the aisle at the wedding, determined to be the grandma of honor. Now, as we know, she loved breakfast, and she had heard about a famous brunch at a local restaurant. She planned to go there the day after the wedding, and the morning that they were planning to go, she found that the elevator at the hotel was broken. This was not going to deter this determined 93-year-old with a recovering fractured hip, fresh off 2 weddings. No way. She walked down 6 flights of stairs, determined to get that brunch. Can't you just see her? In later years, that determination, with a lot of support, and this is a big shout out to Courtney, that determination will help Mom live out her life the way she wanted to, right to the end. We love you all.
Ruth was my mother-in-law for 41 years. The night that Dave and I got back together after we had dated and broken up, Dave went to bed. Ruth and I stayed up till 2 a.m. talking. She told me then that she'd always wished that he would marry me. And he did. Ruth played the part of a mom to me that was amazing. Because the dysfunction in my own family couldn't always do that. And she was there when my mom died holding her hand. And she just means so much to me. This quilt she made for my daughter and her husband for their wedding. And they told her they wanted something with rainbow colors and gave her the ability to do whatever she wanted. And I'll tell you what, that is the most beautiful quilt I've ever seen. Quilts are symbolic of so many things. They wrap us in warmth. They are heritage. They have such meaning. And so I wrote a poem for Mom called Mom's Quilt. And when you hear these words, I want you to almost think also about the meaning behind the stitching in quilts. If the pieces of our lives are a quilt and they're stitched together with the love of God, it becomes a beautiful picture. And Mom's life was stitched in that way. So let me read this to you. The truth of our lives is ever near. It's calling and falling upon every ear. It weaves its patterns so clearly to see, the patchwork quilt that is you and is me. God gives us each life, that we know, to learn and love and laugh and grow. The Father stitches a quilt that's known to only those for whom it's sewn. Your quilt, dear Mom, was intricate, its warmth and comfort infinite. You've shared its love and comfort true in all the many ways you knew. God saw your heart, and so he said, my child, your quilt, it must be spread. And so your life, all stitched in love, has wrapped us all in your gift from above. For 96 years you graced this earth. You've worked and loved and given birth. We've been blessed beyond words to call you mother. Your steadfast support's been a help like no other. You gave of yourself in uncountable ways, and the works of your hands were so worthy of praise. Artistic, creative, so brilliant and driven, our hearts are thankful for all you have given. So as your children, we clearly have known the love from you for which we've grown. Wrapped in the folds of your beautiful life, your quilt held us close and eased our strife. Together today we celebrate you, your love and guidance, gifting all that you knew. Your beautiful heart was the best gift we had, but today we gather with hearts that are sad. The years have passed on, as one by one, and time has flown by and yet only begun, for time is not bound in eternity, forever a truth offered you and me. God now holds Ruth for her life lived to show. The quilt of his love was what helped her to grow. God's love is what stitches our life quilts together. We'll see you again, Mom, in that great forever.
I'm just going to tell you in advance, I might start ugly crying, and I might have to step down. Also, I'm nervous because I don't like talking in front of... Okay. So, if for all who don't know me, my name is Courtney, and I was given the opportunity to live with Grandma for this last year. And I wrote her a little letter. Okay. Dear Grandma, I'm always going to remember the day you called me to ask me to come and live with you. I'm going to remember your straightforwardness and your businesslike manner the moment I picked up. It wasn't your typical grandma call, and I knew I could never say no to you, so I found myself moving in December 2021 after you said I could bring mango. It was very straightforward. It was a very quick conversation. Thinking back now, I wish I had done things differently. I wish I cooked for you more, because I'm not very good at cooking, and I don't like cooking. I wish I could cook more for you and at least learn the patience to do so. I wish I loved sewing, because God knows she tried to get me into it. And all your craft activities like scan and cut, and I didn't want to do it, but I did it for her. That you enjoyed, and I'm sorry, but because of your interest, I have fond memories. I will always remember the days you were in the sewing room and your problem occurred, especially her big, sewing machine. It always seemed to break down, and anytime she would call me and she says, I can't get this thing to work. And I'm like, I don't know if I can fix it, Grandma. So I learned how to work for it. Like, I learned how to use it, and I learned, help her with her handkerchiefs and stuff. So I always remember those days you were in your sewing room and a problem occurred. Despite knowing much about your fancy sewing machine myself, you still believed I could fix the problem. And there were some days where we did it together to solve the problem, and other days where we would have to take a drive to Redlands Sewing Center to get it fixed. I feel as if the machine had more issues than anything else, but the excitement you always had when we fixed the issue together and the smile on your face knowing we wouldn't need to take a drive. I'm going to miss our outings, whether it be to Hobby Lobby or a closing sale at Staples. You needed to go down every single aisle just to make sure nothing was going to be missed. And you had your need to touch everything as you were passing by it. I'm going to especially miss that silly quirk of yours where you would have to find the cheapest childish object, like a pink fuzzy unicorn pen, to remind us of that day. We have 3. I'm going to miss our breakfast at Denny's, sitting across from each other while holding hands. Sometimes we talked about random things like the weather or our plan for that day, while other times we just played red hands, and if you don't know, it's just, you slap each other's hands. She won all the time. Or those days on deciding where to eat for dinner or lunch if we were going on an outing. Neither of us could decide, and it was basically her snapping at me, you better decide now. I'll miss our movie nights and the struggle to find a movie that you would enjoy, or the time I found out your favorite movie was Legally Blonde. She loved the dog. I'll think of the last movie we watched together in December, The Christmas Chronicles, knowing you didn't understand what was happening half the time, and I had to pause it a couple times to remind you or tell you. But she loved it anyway because we were watching it together. I remember going to miss her routine on every single day of the week, watching her Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy. And if she was gone that day, it was recording so she could watch it another day. I'll miss your snarky, yes, ma'am, when I constantly reminded her to use her walker because she always forgot. And I even threatened her that I would handcuff her to the walker if she did not. Her obsession with coffee and how it was impossible to get her to drink water, to where we had to make a deal. I would give up French fries if she would drink more water. It worked a couple times. I'll miss your freezer full of ice cream boxes and how you continued to buy more just because you wanted one flavor. I'll miss our naps and our cuddles on the couch holding hands while talking about nothing in particular. I'll miss the love you had for your dog Cassie and how annoyed you got whenever Cassie chose to sit next to someone else other than you. She felt betrayed. Those times where no one was going to help you. And the fact that she did not like anyone else feeding Cassie, she had to do it. I couldn't do it for her. I'll miss getting birthday wishes from you, and I'll think of the last birthday often with your gift of a dancing monkey and how defeated she looked when it wasn't working. And that day I came in and she's like, I got this for you for your birthday, but it's not working. And all I had to do was pull the tab and it started playing. She was so upset because I saw it before my birthday. Or when we went to the medieval dinner for my birthday and watching her eat a chicken with her fingers on a bone. It's a sight to behold. I'm especially going to miss waking up with your warmly greeting every morning and the many goodnight hugs and I love yous. I'll miss your presence and your laughter, your voice. I'll miss holding your hands and the stories about growing up and the pranks you did. I'll miss our trips to visit your brother and Bill and Nancy. I am so happy that you were able to go on so much family gatherings before. I was happy that you got to see your great-grandchildren, Sage and Esme, because that's what she really wanted. Sorry. I remember my earliest memory with Grandma. When I was 5 years old, I got to travel by myself on a plane, and I discarded my mom like chopped liver because I was gonna see my grandma, and I was gonna be like my big sister. And the moment I get there, I see Grandma greeting me with a hug, and I was very excited, and we got a milkshake. And then the moment I get home to her house, I started crying because I wanted my mom to come get me. And then my last memory of Grandma, the one that I can think of the most, is on December 11, a couple days before she passed. I woke up. She allowed me to sleep in. I woke up. I was not prepared for what she had to say. You better get dressed. We're going to take pictures for Christmas. So I got fancy, and we started taking pictures for Christmas, but I was not ready for it, for Christmas cards. And I worked hard for those Christmas cards while she was taking a nap. Grandma, I believe this day would never occur, that you would live forever and I would have my grandma when I reached an old age. But life doesn't work like that, and despite wishing you were still here holding my hand and watching your shows, I know you are happy and well seeing everyone you love again and walking in the Lord's garden side by side. Grandma, I promise to take care of Cassie, her dog, and love her as you would. Thank you, Grandma, for being the best grandma and giving memories I'll cherish forever. I love you and I'll miss you.
I was so blessed to be raised by two powerful, incredible women. One of them was my mom, Carolyn, and the other one was my formidable grandma, who gave me so many gifts. And I just want to go over the couple that are my favorite. One of them was her ability to just want to give without needing to be recognized or thanked for it. She just wanted to give. And an example of this was when I was 8 or 9 years old, the hot Christmas item was the Razor scooter. and I was looking forward to it. I was hoping Santa was gonna give it to me. And Christmas came, we opened all the gifts, and lo and behold, no Razor scooter. But I was grateful for everything I had. But as I was sitting down after all the gifts had been given, she just poked me in my side and said, "I think that Santa forgot one of your gifts under my bed." And there it was. And I didn't know until years later that it was her. I just thought, Santa or someone else, a gift giver, until I realized that it was her. But that's just who she was. She never wanted me to feel left out of anything, even to the point that she made baby blankets for my future child so that my future child will have something of her. That was how she thought. She just wanted to give, even if she was never going to meet that grandchild. The other thing that I absolutely loved about was her sense of humor. She was so funny. She was incredible. My favorite stories were the ones where she would pull pranks. She put soap in a fountain just to mess with people. And I just fell in love with that, which then inspired me to want to prank her. And if you knew her at all, you knew that she absolutely was deathly afraid of snakes. So I put a purple rubber snake in my suitcase. She was not a fan. But that created a relationship with us where we would just tease each other nonstop. Like Christmases or anytime I tried to visit, we would play dominoes, and she refused to sit next to me because she thought I cheated. Like that was just the relationship we had with each other. Or my last conversation with her, when I was telling her that there was a slight chance I might not come down for Christmas. And she said, "If you don't come down for Christmas, you will be on the naughty list and you will get coal for the rest of your life." So I said, "I'm coming down to Christmas." And the last gift that she gave me was my love of musical theater. She brought me to my first musical when I was younger at the Redlands Bowl. It was My Fair Lady, and I was hooked. Years later, I told her that I was interested in doing it professionally. She did not understand that. And she would call me weekly with new jobs that I could do. She wanted me to be a phlebotomist. Said no thank you. She tried to make me a court typist. I said no thank you. And then she came to when I was Jo in Little Women, and it stopped. And she was so proud. And one of my biggest regrets, because she would always ask me to sing for her friends, or anytime I was visiting, she constantly asked me to sing. And I think one of my biggest regrets is that I always said no, and I know it's so silly, but I just didn't want to disappoint her. I wanted it to always sound amazing. And I wanted her to be just the best. And that's so silly because she was going to love me regardless if I was tone deaf. Even to the point where one of our little couch conversations where I was teasing with her, and I said, I was just joking, and I said, "Grandma, are you disappointed that I'm not married and I don't have a million children by now?" And I thought it was going to be a little joke between us. And she said, "No." She's like, "I could never be disappointed in you. I trust you, and I know that when you're ready, you will find exactly what you're looking for." So this, if I can get through it, this song is for her, and I know that every time that I sing, she's listening, and she is with me. I love you, Grandma. There were bells on the hill, but I never heard them ringing. No, I never. There were birds in the sky, but I never saw them winging. No, I never saw them at all till there was you. And there was. I'm so sorry. Where? Begin? I don't know. Let's do it from the top. From the top? What do you think? Let's go for it. Okay. There were bells on the hill, but I never heard them ringing. No, I never heard them at all till there was you. There were birds in the sky, but I never saw them winging. No, I never saw them at all till there was you. And there was music, and there were wonderful roses. They tell me in sweet, fragrant meadows of dawn and dew. There was love all around, but I never heard it ringing. No, I never heard them at all till there was you.
I am the youngest grandchild of my grandpa, Hal Knight, and my Grammy, Ruth. As I was only 4 years old when Grandpa married Grandma, I knew nothing different. She was Grandma, and her kind heart always treated me as such, one of her granddaughters. Grammy and I shared a special bond and love of crafting, sewing, and embroidery. Friends and coworkers would often ask me how I learned such a unique skill, and I would humbly say my grandma. Often, I'd add in there that she's in her 90s. In college, I tried to visit Grammy on my spring breaks, and we'd spend a few days in her infamous sewing room. We'd often find ourselves with never enough time to do all the projects we set out to complete in the short period of time. One of my favorite memories of Grammy was on one of those trips. My flight arrived around 11 p.m., which would be 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Aunt Heidi drove to pick me up, and of course, Grammy was right there. We drove back to the house and arrived around midnight. As I certainly was ready for bed at this point, being a morning person and not a night owl, she sure wasn't. She excitedly told me, "Oh, you just have to see this." She walked back to her sewing room, eagerly and came back with a big, bright smile on her face and said, "Now we can make some of these this week." If you knew Grammy, you knew how fond of mug rugs she was. At this time, she had only made a couple that would later turn into an extensive collection. We spent another couple hours that night looking at the projects that she had planned for us that week. She was always so excited to share with me what she had been working on since the last time I saw her, and I'm so grateful for our time together. She lived a life of passion for her hobbies, passion for serving, passion for loving, and a passion for her family, welcoming us as her own.
That's a lot of you guys. I'm Matthew. I'm her grandson. I'm not really good at being up front, so I've got a list. I want to read out about how much she meant to all of us, her kids, her grandkids, and her great-grandkids. Grandma was our grandma. She was the true matriarch. She was the glue that brought us all together for Christmases, holidays, birthdays. She was the caregiver. One of the reasons why I wanted to become a nurse was because of her. She was in the quilts she made for everybody, in the Christmas pajamas she made us all wear, in the many, many cakes that we all got to eat, and in the cards and the gifts that she always made sure to send us for every Christmas and birthday. She was in the smile that she hated to have captured on camera, but loved to share with her grandkids and her great-grandkids. She will always be in our hearts, and we can never forget the love she shared with us. She was fun, she was funny, she was determined, she was kindness, she was love, but most of all, she was our grandma.
Hello, my name is Eric Lundquist, and I am lucky enough to be married to Greta Auskirson, who is the daughter of Cherie and Chris. So I suppose that makes me a step-grandson-in-law to the woman that I knew as Grammy Ruth. I met her shortly before our wedding in the summer of 2019, where she just came from another. Oh my goodness, wasn't that amazing? I think just a couple of things that I wanted to focus on when I was asked if I was interested in speaking. This idea of determination from Ruth. Greta and I visited her in October of 2019 was our first visit, and we offered her, we'd just like to spend time with you. We'll spend time with you around the house. If there's anything you need help with, anything like that. And she says, no, we have adventures to go on. And so she took us to the Living Desert, a little east of here. And as many of you might have remembered, she had that scooter that she had in the back of her car there. And she insisted that she was just fine. She didn't let us touch the thing. She's like, I got this, no problem. Pulls it out. And so we were scooting around the Living Desert for a long time that day. She wanted to take us to something special. And she said, you need to feed the giraffes. And I didn't have much interest in feeding giraffes, to be honest. I thought, well, this might be interesting. Let's see what this is all about. Gosh, was that fun. Can you imagine? She rolls us up there and talks to the attendant, and you buy a little bit of feed, and you stick your arm out, and this giraffe comes up to you with this big, long tongue. And it comes out, and I feel like my arm was just wet, just with this big long tongue of this giraffe. But it was so much fun. And there she was laughing at us as we're doing this, and we were all having a really nice time together. In terms of that determination, she was going around on the scooter, and she would get stuck occasionally. Not everything is paved there and all that. And she would never say, "I need help." She's like, "I'm stuck." And then would expect a little bit of assistance there, and we got through. The other thing is that I want to focus on just an aspect of her and her warmth and welcoming. As a few others have mentioned, that they felt like even if they weren't a blood relation to her, they felt welcomed. And so when I became a part of the family, I too received birthday cards and those phone calls, which, by the way, lasted like almost exactly 5 minutes. In fact, I timed one of them. We got to 4:59. She's like, "Well, it was very nice talking to you today." And it's like, okay, there's the end of that one. But I think if there's something that we can learn and think about these two things is how do we apply that to our lives? What can she teach us? And to be welcoming to others and to be determined in the things that we're striving to do. So thank you very much.
What a great gift you have given to all of us to get to hear stories from every season of Ruth's life. And I know there are so many stories that could be told here too, because she lived a beautiful life. But thank you for giving us the gift of your words and your stories and your relationship and your song, every part. What a precious gift that is to each of us that are gathered here right now. Ecclesiastes 3 says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time for love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." And then what follows this very familiar section in Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart." This final verse in verse 11 that I just read shows that there is never a good time to die. There is a time for it, yes. Solomon says, there's a time. Indeed, we have to come face to face with death. But it's never a good time because eternity was set in our hearts. We can look objectively today and see that in all the ways that someone could be ready to die, Ruth Parrott Knight was. She lived a good life. She invested deeply in people. She welcomed others. She laughed full and played hard. She teased and engaged in silly fun. She traveled, she gave, she worshiped, she loved. And oh, she loved well. Yet because of this very thing, there is never
a good time for you to say goodbye to her. So today we hold two things: gratitude deep and full for the life that she lived. She honored God with her life in beautiful ways. And grief because we want her still in our lives today. I had to stop myself last month before baptizing someone, because it's the first time in nearly 7 years that I'm not holding a handkerchief embroidered by her. And instead, I had a plain washcloth in my hand, and I had to stop to feel the grief of missing her and the touch that she left on all of us, the beauty, when I would explain to each person being baptized that this was a gift, and that not all gifts in the body of Christ are seen up front, but that this was made by someone who's using their gift for Jesus. And just like she did, there will be gifts that you use that no one sees, but that are still treasured. I didn't get to say those words, but I remembered her. Raylene described that Ruth was from the same era as the queen, who just passed to her rest. And after she said that, I had to go back and read and watch parts of documentaries in preparation for today. And I found your words to be true. Following her coronation on June 2nd, 1953, the Queen made a broadcast in the evening reflecting on the events of the day and thanking the public for their support. And I quote, she said, "Throughout this memorable day, I have been uplifted and sustained by the knowledge that your thoughts and prayers were with me. All of you, near and far, have been united in one purpose. It's hard for me to find words to tell you of the strength which this knowledge has given me. I have sincerely pledged myself to your service as so many of you have pledged to mine. Throughout my life and with all my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your trust. I thank you from a full heart. May God bless you." We see in Ruth's life the same, a pledge to serve with her whole life and heart. She did this. And Courtney, you gave her a gift. I got to be introduced to you for the first time every Sabbath sometimes. It was like, yes, I know, Courtney. "This is my granddaughter," though, is what she would say each time. "This is my granddaughter." I said, "Oh, and you love her?" "Yes, I do." You gave her the gift of being in her home and dying in her home. It's a rare gift. Ruth died with 1 foot forward. When she was found, she was starting her day with 1 foot on the bed and 1 foot on the floor, with no pain on her face but complete peace. She had a long list of things to do that she wanted to accomplish, and she did them. She had visited family, she had met great-grands, she had all of her kids home at Thanksgiving, the thing she was most joyful about when she told me and hugged me. She finished projects, but in no way had she run out of things to do. When she died, she was still planning that very week to get a haircut, to travel, to finish another project, and to take that class with Eva in which she would learn some new skills. This is why I always told her, "Ruth, I want to be like you when I grow up." Constantly learning, loving, devoting herself to God. I will never forget when my jaw dropped to the floor when she got out of the hospital, got dropped off back at her home, and then hopped in her car to come to the church office. Moments after she had been dropped off, right, Nanette? She said, "I had to come check on things. How are you doing here?" Nanette and I were like, "You just left. You were hospitalized for days." She said, "So how's it going?" She had to check with Nanette on the spelling of the names for the baptism handkerchiefs and make sure we had enough baby blankets so that we could give them. She, like the Queen, was committed to a life of service. Someone committed to give herself on behalf of others. Perhaps, yes, this determination defines her. But determined at what? Giving, sharing herself, living to the fullest. I love that picture of all the hands raised for the wedding cakes in this room, for the baby blanket for someone not yet born. A giver, a heart full of love. That quote that you said, really, I love it. The question is not who will let me, but who will stop me. In Hebrews 11, there's a list of people who followed God with such passion and such faithfulness. After describing these individuals, the author of Hebrews shares in chapter 12, verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance, determination, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes upon Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Hebrews goes on to share that Jesus was able to endure pain because of the joy he knew was coming. He had endurance because of the joy set before him. What he focused his mind on was the joy of his children who would come to the heart of God because of the sacrifice he made. The joy set before him was Ruth and David and Caroline and Raylene and Heidi and Courtney and Chelsea and Matt, and the list could go on. I believe Ruth, like Jesus, endured through her pain because of the people she loved and served, and that she, like him, found her joy in her life being about giving. She ran with determination all her life. You and I can now count her as one among the great cloud of witnesses, the ones that surround us now. You have a great cloud of witnesses. Ruth, who lived a life of service, who fixed her eyes on Jesus, who demonstrated determination. She still had one foot forward, moving into her day with love and service, even on the day that she died. Heidi, I love that H, heaven, because that will be that trip that she is looking forward to most. And what I pray for all of us, all her family, and all of her friends who loved her, is that we would, like she, look to Jesus and refuse to give up when things are hard, but to keep pressing on to live the life you are called to. May we all have the courage and the strength from Jesus to do the same.
Thank you for sharing these moments and memories. We weep with you, and we also rejoice in a life well lived and a witness and a legacy that will go on. The family invites you to visit with them in the fellowship hall immediately afterwards. We will allow the family to follow Pastor Tara to the fellowship hall first, and then Pastor Starla and I will usher you out row by row. The quickest way to get to the fellowship hall is to go out that door there, so choose your route however you wish. Let's bow our heads. Loving God, thank you for the witness and legacy of Ruth Knight. Thank you for being in her life and showing us more about your life through her. And thank you for weeping with us today and for giving us your comfort. I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.